A very good evening to everyone, and welcome all the participants. Our learned speaker Santa Kumar sir has already arrived. Welcome, Santa Kumar sir, and we welcome you on behalf of ACICM Meerut Foundation, STICIT Madras, and IEEE UP section. And we are running this program on entrepreneurship and innovation, and mostly the first part covered what is the innovation and other things. A few innovators shared their journeys, and now we started with the entrepreneurship part. And to start with, to familiarize our audience with the entrepreneurship, what are the risks, what are the stories, what are the methods which the entrepreneurs evolved about from their journey. So we thought of sharing their journey first before going to the theory and other models. So in the innovation, we followed a model of giving the insight about innovation and other things. Then we slowly moved on to the words from innovators, but from entrepreneurs, because this is highly selective, and it is actually depends on people choice to become an entrepreneur. So without wasting much time, I'm uh, uh, transferring this hosting to my colleague Sumitra from STICIT Madras, and Sumitra will help us to conduct this session today. Sumitra, please take over.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Before we move to the session, can you make Palniappan sir as also co-host, since he also joined the meeting?
Sure. I'm just making.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. So I welcome all you to the session. So today we have two speakers from the HTIAC, and the two startups has also been successfully graduated from IIT. So now I would like to introduce the speakers for the today's session is Mr. Shantakumar sir, so who is a co-founder of Cornerstone Devices Private Limited, and he also have a 28 years of experience in medical equipment, and he also has been a successful entrepreneur. And the second speaker is Mr. Palniappan, so who is also a co-founder of Moziro Health Solutions Private Limited, and he also has 11 years of experience in mobile payments and commercial product management professional in US and UA and Indian markets. So I warmly welcome you both the speakers. So over to Shan sir and Palniappan sir to start the session.
Yeah, thank you, Sumitra, and thank you, Dr. Pathak, for inviting us. And I have to apologize for first of all the background. I'm unfortunately stuck in Coimbatore in a hotel, so I didn't want to miss doing this. And if I had taken the flight, I would have been sitting the flight now. So you may see some internet issues, but I hope that this entire session will be useful and worthwhile for you. Palniappan, to you.
Hi everyone, good evening. Thank you, Dr. Pathak, Muthu sir and Sumitra for inviting us. It's quite a pleasure to talk to an audience about entrepreneurship and the journey. It's quite a learning curve for us as well. So on this thing, today's session, Shantakumar sir is quite a senior and experienced entrepreneur. This is his 9th company. So we had a conversation. We thought we'll take it up as a conversation between us, because it would be an opportunity for me to also understand his journey and learn from him, while I share my experience as well. Dr. Pathak, would that be okay if we can take this as a conversation with the entire audience? Okay. Are we audible? Like, if there are any glitches?
Yes, sir. You are audible. Sorry, sir. Pathak sir is not there. So we are fine with you to take the session as a conversation session.
Okay, there's an interesting question to start with, sir. I think we'll take it as a conversation from there as well. As the question says, does seniority count in entrepreneurship? I think I'll take that question. Definitely a lot, because see, it's more about experience. Now, the difference between a first-time entrepreneur, which is the perspective that I'm going to talk about during the conversation today, and the perspective that Mr. Shantakumar will be bringing in is about starting up multiple times. There's a lot of difference. The first time when you're starting up, you would be discovering a lot of things, discovering how to hire, what are your hiring sources, where to, what are the problems that you're fixing, who are your clients, who are your, say, customers, who are your vendors, suppliers. So entrepreneurship is all about a network. So you are establishing that network the first time. So definitely a senior entrepreneur has all of this in his experience with the prior startups and the number of years of details, I mean, entrepreneurship that he's gone through. So that takes time. It's not an overnight journey that you build your entrepreneurship network as well. Sir, do you want to add any perspective on that front? And probably with that, it would be very interesting for me also to understand, how did you start up? What really motivated you to start up your first venture, and how did you go about the process?
Okay. All right. So I think there is already a lot of interest in the chat. So first of all, let me tell you that seniority in entrepreneurship doesn't necessarily mean that it makes you successful. The only reason why I would think that seniority may be an advantage is to look back on past mistakes and then see how it can be corrected, and how mitigating that kind of a problem can really be helpful. But a larger lesson from that, I think, would emerge, where I would personally say that even leave alone entrepreneurship, life itself is a journey, and you need to enjoy every bit of that journey. There will be challenges, there will be success stories, there will be joys, there will be sorrows. So unless we learn to enjoy the day or the moment, we will not enjoy it, because you will get success in your entrepreneurial journey, but then you will also see some areas of challenge. There will be good days, there will be bad days. We'll talk a little bit more about that a little later. But then coming back to Palniappan's question on what motivated me to start, I had absolutely no intention of becoming an entrepreneur or a businessman when I was in school or even in college. So my biggest interest when I was in school was electronics. So I was an electronics hobbyist, and anything that I wanted to do sort of circled around that. So as soon as I finished school, we had a couple of months break, and there was an interesting opportunity. Naval base in Cochin, where I studied, had a housing society, and they were having an auditorium which required a PA system. So to build a public address system for me in that stage was not something big. So we said, I would like to take this on. So without any formal, understanding of business, we just did a very basic calculation and said, okay, this will be the cost for components, and therefore we will sell it at this price. So the contract itself was worth about 25,000 rupees at that time. So we bought mics, speakers, built the amplifier, worked out what kind of wires we would need to run through. And it was as simple as that. So that's what really started me off. I didn't have a formal company. It was just an opportunity to exercise my technical skills. So, so it was not construed as a business itself. So from there, I just want to give you a very quick lesson that I learned from that first opportunity. We built the system. Technically, there was no issue. We went and installed the system. We had borrowed money from a friend's father to get the components. And once we installed, the housing society gave us a check. And so we presented it to the bank and said we would like to buy the check because we wanted to pay back my friend's father. And so the bank agreed, and they released an amount of, I think, 12,000 rupees at that time. And we paid back the friend's father. But unfortunately, after 3 days, we got a very frantic phone call from the bank manager saying that the check bounced. It was a very simple mistake from the housing society's side, and but it was almost a week of high tension for us. So that was a lesson learned. First of all, we need to be very careful about how we ask for payment. So the payment terms have to be clear, and we need to be very clear who we are dealing with. We also need to be clear on when we purchase a check or we want to draw from a check which has not been presented to the bank actually. So these are very early lessons, and it was very interesting. Now in hindsight, those days it was a huge challenge and a big worry for us. I hope that answers your question, Palnev.
Yeah. So very interesting. So right out of school, there was an opportunity to build a PA system, and then you jumped on it because it was probably in your area of interest of electronics, and you picked it up. When did you actually realize, hey, this is not just a one-off venture which you wanted to do and wanted to do this for the rest of your life?
So it didn't sort of dawn on me when I was in school and even college. My interest would have been to become a scientist or work in research and development. I never ever imagined that I would get into business. So this what the ventures that I got into early in life. I never thought of it as a business. I never thought of it as entrepreneurship. It's just looking at it as a need that was there, and I could fulfill that need. So later on, looking back, I realized that that actually is entrepreneurship. We have certain skills that we can offer, and bridge a gap. And when it really interests us and there is passion in what we do, that actually becomes an enterprise, and that becomes a business. So yeah, in hindsight, I realized that I was starting my first business venture soon after school. Yeah.
Okay, nice, very interesting. So I have a totally different journey on this front. Like, so there's one question that says, does B school give you exposure to be an entrepreneurship? So I think I'll take that question. I am an engineer and an MBA from SPJ in Bombay. So typical B school grad, passed out of B school. So the first thing that the B school put on me was a huge education loan. So entrepreneurship was immediately out of question as soon as you graduate out of a B school. Now it gives you exposure to run a business, but to be an entrepreneur, I think that's a totally different skill set. Now, whether you're from a B school, top college grad, or not even a graduate, entrepreneurship is a skill set that is found in everybody, or probably trained, or the grit is there in everybody when they're pushed to a corner. So my journey is, I had been the typical engineer, MBA, B school grad, working up the corporate ladder for about 10-12 years. But one thing when I did those entire 10-12 years was, every year it would be like the time where I would look for my promotion, my increments and my opportunity to grow within the organization. Now, after a point of time, I realized that a lot of my thoughts had become more self-centric in terms of my growth and my promotions and increment. Whereas entrepreneurship is a totally different experience, in the sense it's about, as I put it earlier, it's more about a network. So if you're an entrepreneur, you have about 20-30 employees. It's more their problems that you have to solve so that they keep the business running. Then if you have your clients, you need to understand what your problems of the clients are. Most of the time that leads you to more business opportunities and growth as well. So I found entrepreneurship more to be an outward thinking opportunity, and a more enjoyable opportunity than being on the work side, because that 10 years was more about self-centric, and now it's about 4 years that I've started up. One thing that I'm quite happy is there are enough challenges and new challenges every day, but one thing that has happened for the last 4 years is I've not got bored a single day. So if that counts as happiness, yeah. So that's the thing. So entrepreneurship and B School probably does not have any connection. It's more your internal thought process than anything else. How would you agree on that, sir? So what's your perspective of it, and how did you start your first formal venture, and how did that take off?
Sure. So let me answer your first question first, about the B School playing a role in entrepreneurship. I think there are some advantages of having graduated from a B School, because it provides you an overview of a business, and that will help you to structure what you're doing right. But again, as you pointed out, that alone does not make you an entrepreneur. There is a lot of passion that needs to come from within to do what you want to do, and not only have a passion but also the grit to continue in spite of all the challenges that you will face. I was going to say may, then I said no, you will face challenges, absolutely. So taking off from there and then to the first formal venture. So soon after the first venture, and the second one was when I was still in college. So there was an opportunity to build a timing control system for a pollution control company in Hyderabad, and so I took that on. There again, it seemed to be something that I could do, and based on my experience by then of electronics as a hobbyist, I said the current product that they have is okay, but then there's so much more features that I can add to this that will make it really work so well, and it will be so attractive to the customer. So I put together a set of specifications and built the devices. We had to initially supply 10 devices, so I put down 10 devices and took it to the field. But once I installed it, I found that the work environment there was completely different from what I imagined, and I had overspec'd the product, and therefore it actually was a failure. So I had to take back all the 10, and I had to break it down and say, okay, this is the basic spec that they need, and I shouldn't do anything beyond that. If I do anything beyond that, then it's not going to work in that environment, either because of human intervention or because of the work environment itself that could create the problem. Therefore, I had to eat my ego and cut down on the specs that I thought would be great. So that was the second learning. The other learning that I also had was being very open and transparent with the customer, especially when you run into problems. And it just happened that though this customer was extremely annoyed with me because I couldn't deliver on time because of the overspecking, he was willing to work along with me to find a solution. He gave me the extra time. He, in fact, paid for the hotel that I was staying in Hyderabad while I was reworking the system. So it's very important. These are a couple of things that I learned from that particular venture. To be very open and transparent with the customer, especially when you're going through challenges and when you're not able to meet timelines, or when you're not able to meet the installation dates and stuff like that. And also to be very careful when you are doing your spec. Keep it simple and make sure that what you deliver in terms of your lead time, as well as how you come through in your installation and after sales support, that should be value, and the customer should actually enjoy that extra bit of service that you provide to them. Of course, it's always good to give them some extra gadgetry in your device and some additional spec, but make sure that that is required. Otherwise, it's just added spec, added cost, and sometimes it even works negatively for you. So that's the first part of the question. And then my first formal venture happened in 91. I was working with a company called IMI Medical. We were into medical devices. So that's my first job. I started as a sales service engineer, went on to becoming service manager. And a few years of being a service manager, I was then sort of looking around, should I quit and go to another organization? And that's when my boss came up with this idea that we can manufacture a product that we were distributing. And since I had not really done proper formal business, so I said okay. So I decided that I would stay around and I would lead the startup from scratch. Did technology transfer from a Swiss company and built the company from ground up. So that was a very interesting one, because I was managing the service for my previous company, IMA Medical, and then I was also running the startup. So while we were doing this, the only reason why I could do two things was because I've always had this sort of thing in my capacity that I can't just be doing one. I like to do multiple things. When I see opportunities, I like to jump into doing multiple things. Again, this is in hindsight, but while I was doing it, it seemed very natural to me. The advantage was that my boss was also my co-founder, and therefore time allocation became much easier. I also had a great team in my service department, and therefore, when I was not available, I could always, they could always take care of it. So, yeah, so that was my first formal venture called Vital Instrumentation Private Limited. We were manufacturing infusion pumps for the medical industry at that time, and we were the first actually to make infusion pumps in India. We had set up our factory in Mahi, which is north of Calicut. We chose Mahi because it was an industrially backward location, and we got a lot of SOPs from the government. 5 years of sales tax exemption and 10 years of income tax exemption. So, I mean, that was really something worth doing. Yeah.
Oh, that's a very interesting thing, sir, because you actually probably integrated this question in a lot of places. So people are always working, and a lot of the work environment has a group of people always talking about startup. But a lot of people really do not take or venture into it, what I say, because I have been part of formal work organization for more than 10, 11 years before starting up. So how did you, I mean, just as you explained, luckily you had your boss as your co-founder, so you could manage time. But what were the real challenges, and when did you actually decide to let go of the paying job and venture into it full time? Because that's a very, very difficult decision. Did both of you do it together, or who came out first, and how did that happen, sir?
Yeah, so it was a fairly long run. I was managing the service department and vital instrumentation for almost 9 years, because my boss actually wanted me to, at least be a figurehead for the service department and manage some key customers. Actually, it worked out well because uh, uh, being in the service department, you get an inroad into the customer very quickly, and the network that you have is not from a sales perspective. So typically, doctors or even nurses, they would prefer to interact with a service or a technical guy because he's coming to solve their problem. So that was the kind of network that I had. So I think it was a very wise move from my boss, and he said, don't let that go. Even if you're not going to be attending service calls or managing the service department, it's okay. But have that network in place, and therefore we continue to do that. And then the as the startup grew, we launched the product. We started in 91, but we launched the product by end of 92. Though it was a tech transfer, we still had to do a lot of clinical validations here. And then our first customer was Jipmer in Pondicherry. So I still remember doing the soldering myself, because the lead time was very short, and I had only 2 people with me to do the testing and the soldering. So the first 28 units we did manage, right from soldering to assembling to testing ourselves. And I was part of the whole thing, right from developing vendors to doing quality control, IQC, as it came in, and then the outbound quality management, everything. It was hugely useful because later on, when the company grew, I knew exactly every process. And these are things that really help you to be well versed with all the functions. So being multifunctional right in the initial stages, it's easier to mitigate problems as it crops up later on.
Absolutely.
So yes, so I it was like almost 8 years actually. So in the meantime, we started our the next venture in 95, again with my boss. So that was called Vital Biosystems, which still runs. I still manage Vital Biosystems. So that was for manufacturing blood gas and electrolyte analyzers with, again, technical collaboration with those days Siba Corning Diagnostics, which was subsequently purchased by Chiron Diagnostics, and then Chiron was taken over by Bayer. So Bayer being a huge healthcare giant, we had just a couple of years, continuing that, and then we had to close down that particular project. But Vital Biosystems still continued as a company. We went into manufacturing of telemedicine projects. So we were into things like pulse oximetry, non-invasive blood pressure, and then we just added ECG, and then it was easy for us to move from there to telemedicine, because we had good technical people who would be there to innovate. And in 99, when we were just having the, not even 19, I think 2000, when the Reliance phones came in with GPRS for data, we could actually transmit over GPRS and do it, live, meaning ECG was live, pulse oximetry was live. So from one end to the other end, this was live. It was like someone watching the patient monitor on their computer screen, whereas the patient was in a different part of the state. So this project we did for Amrita Institute in Cochin. They had a small unit in Sabrimala. So as the pilgrims were climbing up the mountain, many had heart problems, and they had to monitor them. So they didn't have a cardiologist full time. So this was an opportunity, and we did the first telemedicine project for them as early as 2000. That is Vital Biosystem and how that progressed.
Wow. So you actually had two ventures and you were managing a full-time job. So things must have been really haywire at home. How did you manage that, sir?
Yeah. So those were long hours, and I used to stay in Mahi for 20 days, and I used to come back to Chennai maybe for 10 days, and then this was typical. So I got married late, so that was a blessing. So 97 I got married, and then things also by then changed. So we decided that doing two companies and then managing one more was crazy. So by then we had found someone else who would replace me in IMI, and so I was still managing two ventures, which still took a lot of time, and it takes a lot of grit because you always have this huge problem of stock. So if you have stock, then you need to have orders. Now, if you're not able to predict your orders very clearly, which in the medical industry is very difficult to do, because we are talking about small quantities of very highly technical products, which are also high. So that makes it even more difficult, because lead times become a problem when we get components, and then when we sell it again, the lead time becomes a problem. So managing those were the high level problems that we used to have, but then with very good interaction with principals and also good interaction with customers, some of those problems could be mitigated. But I think those are areas in which the experience plays a role, because when you are experienced, your relationship with customers as well as relationship with vendors become a little bit more easier, because they start looking at you as a player who's been in the field for a while, and then they can't pull wool over your eyes. But yeah, so those are some areas which I think having that experience would count. So it was long hours, but I think once you have a clear structure in place, and when you have reliable employees who understand their function, and once you are very clear with what they are expected to do, and then it's a little bit easier. So I think structuring the workforce itself is a skill that you acquire, and when you have that, then your job becomes that much more easier.
Absolutely, sir. I mean, this is my 4th year of entrepreneurship. I can agree with a lot of what you're saying. Going through the initial phases, probably what you had through in 90s, just that the field is different. You were doing on the electronics side, so more medical instrumentation and devices. For us, it's more medical software. So as you say, the first 1 or 2 years when you go out in the market, people are like, who are you? How old are you? So the moment you say you're a 1-year-old startup, 2-year-old startup, they expect you to come back for at least 6 months before they trust you that you're a player who's not going to run away overnight. And before you convert your first large orders, it really does take time. Now it's in our 4th year that we have got some really credible or large organizations trusting us and giving us projects. So absolutely, I could relate to that, and the long hours as well, because this is the time you are structuring your team for growth and all of it. But from there, how did you decide, like your first 2 ventures you were while you were starting up, but today morning when we were conversing, you said this is your 9th startup. So how did 2 become 9 in the last 10, 15 years? And what motivated you?
Yeah, so again, the motivation was always technical for me. So motivation was not really commercial. See, so when I saw that there was a gap, that gap was something that I could fill. So there was this opportunity to make it an enterprise. For example, when I was in the first formal venture in vital instrumentation and we were building infusion pumps, we were buying the digital displays from the market, and we found that the digital displays were so bad. I mean, these are the old 7-segment LED displays. So the quality that we got was really bad, and so we looked at several options, and then we said we will make it on our own. And so we made the displays for the infusion pump. But then I also saw that there is a huge opportunity in the mills, that textile segment, that these counters could really be used, and therefore we sort of spun that off into another company. And so that was another venture that came while I was doing vital instrumentation and biosystem. But then I got a good partner who understood business, who was from the commercial side, and I was just giving the sort of consulting for the technical part of it, and we got a one person who could actually build these displays. So that was one venture. Then as we were growing, I was also consulting for a couple of American companies. And while I was doing that, I was selling technology into Indian manufacturers. So I was consulting for a company called Dolphin Medical, which was into pulse oximetry technology. They were also doing finished products. So I was doing both. So I was distributing the finished product and I was consulting for the technology. So we got into companies like BPL and Allengers and all that. So while we are doing that, we also found that there is a need for technical support to interface or to prove these technologies to the manufacturers. So I again saw an opportunity, and I had a friend who was a graduate from IIT Mumbai. So he was a PG from IIT Mumbai. So I asked him if he would like to come down to Chennai and join with me in another venture where he would be completely immersed in only product development as well as technology integration. And he said yes, and so we formed another company called Technolink Devices. So that company lasted for about 7 years. So unfortunately, that's one company which was very early on. I hadn't put my attention to it, and therefore, when I exited it, it was not a successful venture. So I learned a lot from it. The first thing is, if you are a founder, you better be fully immersed in the company. If you are not, then it's not going to be functioning like you would intend it to. So that was Technolinks, and then another company which I formed along with a Singaporean called Neurostyle Devices, and then the current one, Cornerstone Devices. We started in 2017. Very interesting because a friend of mine introduced me to Dr. Roy Santosham, who is a radiologist. And the friend who introduced me to Dr. Roy Santosham was an accountant. So he's a chartered accountant. And when we sat and had our discussion, I was really intrigued by the product. Again, being a sucker for technology, I couldn't resist, going and seeing the product and what it did. And the way doctor explained how this product should work really made me, interested. And then, somehow we hit it off together, and the three of us, founded Cornerstone Devices. What was really interesting was, I came from a very technical background and had several, businesses running. Doctor was purely from clinical side, but he had also, worked along with someone to develop a product. And then we had the third guy who was purely commercial, meaning from the accounting perspective. So we thought that this was a good combination of different functions coming together, and that's how Cornerstone was born. And we had our we developed our first prototype very quickly and had it installed in a doctor's scan center. And so he has a CT machine, and our device is basically a needle positioning device, and so it works in conjunction with a CT machine. So very quickly we got that up and running. We did a few insertions on phantoms, and doctor, because of who he is, he was also able to do human cases. Very quickly got all the clinical requirements for doing clinical cases, and then we got that done. Then we did our clinical validation in CMC Vellore. In the meantime, we formed the company. We got incubated in HTIC. We also managed to get a BIRAC grant, and till then we were bootstrapped. And eventually, patents were granted. The Indian patents were granted. The China patent is granted now, and we have also applied for the US and Europe patents. And while that journey was going on, we were also connected with a company called V-Titan. They came to us in a very interesting way because they were developing a syringe pump, and I already had infusion syringe pump experience in my kitty, and therefore, they showed the product to me, and I gave them some pointers on what they could do to fix the problems that they were having. And the conversation started, and they were looking for products that were already finished and which could be taken to market. And we said, hey, High Noon, which is our device, is there. So conversation became even deeper, and eventually we did tech transfer. So that's where we are. We are in the process of completing different stages of the tech transfer. So yeah, so I would say that this was a very interesting journey for me from what I started in 91 as a formal venture to the startup today. The ecosystem and the scenario is completely different. I didn't know what a startup was in 91. So it's a very interesting and long journey, but every bit of it, I would say, I wouldn't say that I enjoyed every bit of it, but I think the fulfillment comes when you solve problems. And whether you're solving a technical problem with a product, or whether you're solving a problem in your own organization, in your own venture, once it is done, there is fulfillment. And that's the whole essence of life itself. You enjoy it when you find fulfillment in what you do.
Absolutely, sir. Sir, when you talk about problems, one thing if I noticed and wanted to highlight probably to the team is, I mean, you explained your journey from your first startup to the ninth one right now. At every startup you've had or you've met with some interesting partners or co-founders who have helped you through the entire process. So, I mean, that's probably another very important step towards entrepreneurship, because as you're solving a lot of problems, solving like, say, your client's problems, your employees' problems, your office problems, process problems, structure problems, finance problems, it's quite important to have right mentors, partners, founders, co-founders during the journey, because I think that's that's probably part of the entrepreneurship network which I talked about. And we can cycle back to the earlier question of how experience brings it up. So if you are like 5-10 years into the field, I'm sure 10-20 people with similar backgrounds, people who have gone through similar journeys, people who have gone through similar difficulties, who can probably nudge you at the right point, push you in the right direction, or probably stop you from making mistakes that you have made, or which they have made probably, which you never really know how costly they could turn out to if you make it. So I think the most enjoyable part about the entrepreneurship is the ecosystem that you work in and you create, and that's what you would fondly look back today with every company that you succeeded or failed. Is that true, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think as I said, the journey itself is the joy. And as you progress, you learn to even enjoy the challenges, because you see there are many experiences of challenges that you have overcome and come through. So when you
Absolutely.
look back, yeah, it was indeed a challenge, but then I came through that. It's not like I cannot surmount what is right in front of me. In fact, today I'm here in Coimbatore because there is a technical problem which I could have actually asked my engineer to come and handle, but I took it on myself because of timelines. So I'm still doing this. I'm still seeing these problems, still giving my views on how it can be done, and there is a lot of joy when you can mitigate that, when you can be part of a solution, and having like-minded, goal-oriented co-founders, or even having that kind of a group of people who are working alongside you really helps. Again, going back to the question of does experience help, this just struck me that Dr. Roy Santosham has more than 30 years of experience, and because of that, he is world renowned. So he has so many connections across the world in radiology, and so that makes it so much more easier for me to get into his network. If I were to do it, it would have taken much longer. But for me to get into his network, it's so much easier because he's senior. People listen to him, and see, at the end of the day, where the rubber meets the road, it's who pays for your idea. But getting into the network is so much more easier because of the experience that is there.
Absolutely. So I think we are running short of time. We should leave about 15 minutes for questions.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
After the question answers, probably we'll just wind it up with one or two more conversations.
Sure.
So I think most of them, there's a question which says, join your dad's company and running business or start on your own venture. So any thoughts on that, sir?
I would say, follow your heart. I mean, it seems like a very used cliche, but then see, if you really want to enjoy what you're doing, you should have passion for it. So that passion is what will continue to drive you through the challenges. So if it is somebody else's business, or even if it is your dad's business, if you don't have passion for what you're doing, it will be a tough journey. You will still be able to mitigate those challenges. You will still be able to go through it. You will still see fulfillment, but not as much as it would if your heart was fully in it and it was your passion, and that's what drove you. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think I would agree to that. Or the second thing is also about it's about whether you like it, and the second thing is also about the freedom that you'll get to run it. Because as an entrepreneur, a lot of times it's also about the freedom that you have to decide and take decisions and move company in a certain directions where you see it right or wrong. So that also works with co-founders. So like-minded co-founders who both are interested in the same direction is what is going to help. If you have a co-founder with a totally different mindset, then that's also not headed the right way. So I think that's the thing that I wanted to add. A couple of other questions. Is it a good idea to buy technology from abroad or abroad for your startup? So since you have the experience now, we are building everything on our own, so we've not imported or done anything. So I mean, you talk about tech transfers and all. So the question is it a good idea to buy technology and then do manufacturing here? I don't know who asked this, This is Sneha. Anything else you want to add on to it, Sneha?
You can actually unmute and speak so that we can have a conversation. If Sneha is
Yes,
still there.
I'm making her to unmute.
Yeah, if not, in the meantime, I can also add a couple of thoughts. I'm just, yeah, Sneha, you're there. So would you like to ask the question again?
Hello, am I audible, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can be a little louder, it will be great.
Okay, so I see that some of the technology has already been developed by some other like companies or some institutions abroad, and we want to have the same thing indigenously developed here. So in that case, is it a good idea to start from the scratch, or can we go for a technology transfer in that route? Which one is the best option?
Yeah. So yeah, now I understand the question. So if there is already an existing technology, I would say refrain from reinventing the wheel. I've had that experience. So we were trying to develop pulse oximeter from scratch, and it took me 2 years, and I still didn't have a good product. And therefore, what we did was we got the technology, just the sensor with the processing board from a good company in the US, but we built the rest of it with additional features that were not existing at that time. So as long as you are able to add some innovation and make it more acceptable to the end user, it actually makes sense to use technology that is already there. Otherwise, you're going to spend a lot of time catching up. And what will happen is by the time you catch up to the level of what is already developed, that technology would have gone forward again. So it's a catch-up game, which I think is not worth playing. Now, if you have a completely new idea, then start it from scratch. That's what I would suggest.
Thank you, sir. It makes sense also. But is it really easy to go directly approach them if someone is having a product?
It completely depends on their business model. For example, because patient monitoring became a huge requirement worldwide, companies like Massimo or Dolphin Medical or Nonin, all these companies, though they were having their own pulse oximeters, they decided that they will, license out their technology to patient monitor manufacturers worldwide. Now, companies are also starting to understand that they cannot be manufacturing in one place and distributing it across the world effectively if it is required in huge quantities. And therefore, they are looking for local partnerships. So keeping that in mind, this might be a really good opportunity. It depends on what the technology itself is. Now, if it is a patented, very secret technology, which is not sold in huge quantities, I don't think that company will agree to license the technology or give you the do a tech transfer for you, unless what you are offering really makes a lot of business sense to them. So it's worth giving it a shot.
Okay, thank you, sir.
There are a couple of questions on the anonymous panel, so Q&As. So first question says, students who take up entrepreneurship just after graduating face a lot of problems of inexperience and lack of network. How do you cope up with that? There are both advantages and disadvantages to it. The advantages is, as Sir mentioned, you're young, what do you call, you have unlimited energy and time. So the time you take to build a network is rapid. As a student, you're fearless, like you've just graduated, not really seen the say failures and upsides and downsides of a regular life. So you bounce back from failures faster. So the number of times you bounce back and hit probably counts as your experience and builds your network faster. So now what would take me 3-4 years at say 35 to build probably would take a year or two as a student to build. If I had to start up 10 years back, I mean, that's probably the way I look at it. So anything different from your end?
No, I think very rightly said. Just that as a entrepreneur just coming from college, I think if you are into this, one advantage is you don't have the baggage of previous experience. That is one thing. But then so there are some good experiences which you will miss out. The other advice is if you're failing, fail fast. So that you can fail quickly initially, and then you should be willing to let go. That's something that even if you have the passion, you should be willing to let go when you understand that it is not viable anymore. So fail fast and move to the next one.
So that again adds up to your experience, and by the time you fail 3 or 4 ventures, you would have built a network strong enough, a good platform for your successful venture. Especially for product startups having complex logistics, where do you reach out for help? And one more similar thing, when you're the only one in the ecosystem, how do you develop a network of people in other domains? I mean, couple of things probably Sir can also add on. From my thing, I was completely in finance domain, working with banks and all of them before in my prior experience, before starting up in medical, before starting up in the healthcare field. Now in healthcare field also, I'm working on the digital side of things. What really helped me was the incubation at IIT, because I spent 3-4 years day in and day out in this ecosystem, which helped me shape up, understand a lot about the industry, which would have been very difficult otherwise as a new person to the industry. Now, Sir's been in the medical devices right throughout. But for somebody who spent about 10 years in the finance, I would say it's both an advantage and disadvantage. The advantage is I see a lot of open opportunities in this industry. Probably finance is a little more advanced in terms of digital usages. So I see that as a lot more advantage. But to come up with creating the ecosystem, I think incubation opportunities with various incubation cells and all that add on to a lot of network, which you can, which is very difficult to build on your own otherwise. Any points to add, Sir?
No, again, I think you covered it well, because when you're with an incubation, then getting those connects are a little easier. But having said that, you'll need to fearlessly go out there and start making those connections, whether you like it or not.
The good part is in a incubation center, you get the foot in the door. After that, how you get your body through in is your problem.
Yeah. You have to be courageous. See, as an entrepreneur, that's one thing. That's one feature that people will expect of you, and it is required. You need to, whether you know the subject or not, you need to go out there and talk to people. Sometimes you will be scolded, sometimes you will be made a fool of, but this is your passion, this is your business. You have to disregard anything that anybody else says, except when it is of advantage to you. So be courageous. You have to go there and do those things that you are required to do.
Okay, there's a lot of forms and things going on. Any other interesting questions that to take?
I think we have 1 more minute left. So.
Yeah, so then just to summarize, 20 years or more than 20, about 30 years of entrepreneurship. If you had to rewind back and do things differently, what would you have done differently, Sir?
Oh, I mean, there are so many different things that I would have done differently.
Top 2 or 3 for the next 1 minute.
Yeah, just the one on top. I would say that structuring the company right is very important. Getting the right people in place is very important. So I think that was something that really worked for us with Cornerstone, because I didn't have to worry about getting a KOL, because KOL was with me. He was a co-founder. I didn't have to worry too much about the financial aspects of it. I have to worry about getting the money, but then the financial aspect of it on accounting and all that, I didn't have to worry about it because I had a co-founder. So then when we started hiring, we hired through people that we knew. So we actually used a network to hire the right people. We told them what we needed, and then the first employee, when he came on board, he was just the right person. He continues to coordinate everything, and getting the right people on board is very, very important. So the first and the second hires and the third hire, all of them were very, very intentional hires. So that's an experience that I have now, but I didn't have those days. So when I started up, I was doing everything on my own, and I spent less time training people. Now I spend more time training the employees, because then it frees up my time to do other things that are more important. So I think that would be the top of my list.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. I think that's exactly the time, because I enjoyed talking a lot to you, because I mean, understanding the perspective of the mistakes, how do you go on from say your first venture to a second, how do you build a network much faster? That was a great learning. Any other questions, anything else? We hand it over back to Sumitra and team to take it forward.
Yes, sir. There is
Yeah,
one question.
before that, I just want to say a big thank you to Palniappan, because he's the one who put this all up, in terms of shall we have it as a conversation and all that. I really enjoyed doing it, and thanks to you, Palniappan, for making the suggestion and even thinking through all the questions. For me, it was a very tough day, so I wouldn't have been able to do what you did. So yeah, so hats off to you.
And
It
I
was
would
a
like
very easy
to,
thing. These are the top 5-10 questions in my head today as an entrepreneur.
and today I would like to thank Mr. Paliyappan for this, sir, because he came up with this idea of having session in this way. Because earlier it would have been like sharing your journeys as an individual for 20 minutes, then taking up questions. But this kind of interactive session, this whole amalgamation came up so nicely, and it was so well coordinated by Mr. Paliyappan. And thanks, hats off to you, sir.
So again, just to answer that as a true entrepreneur, uh, Shantakumar sir did most of the talking, so I had to think little through of what I had to talk. So asking the questions is easier than answering.
That's
That's how I tackled my lack of time today.
yeah.
And the 5 or 6 questions that I asked him were the top of the mind questions for me when I'm driving through every day.
So that kind of complimentary session was needed. The experience of Shanta sir and the efforts you are making up as a first generation entrepreneur, both have amalgamated in such a way that whatever was required there, that complemented each one's journey.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, sir.
Thank you so much,
Thank
sir.
you.
Looking forward to host you again soon, because the participants are too very excited, and they also want to meet you again.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Santa sir. Thank you, Pal.
All right. Take care. It was lovely being with you all. Take care.
Thank you so
Bye.
much, sir.
Thank you, guys.
Bye. Thank you, guys. Bye.